The Elder Scrolls Skyrim is filled to the brim with jewelry. There are amulets that can shorten your shout times, and there are rings that can allow you to infinitely cast spells with the right knowledge, but there are very few pieces of jewelry that give you offensive abilities. The release of the Anniversary Edition has opened up a new plane of existence for challenge runners like myself, and has given us new opportunities to use what little brain cells we have left. Can you beat Skyrim using only jewelry? First, it's time to lay out the rules. All damage is to be done only through the usage of jewelry. Any damage through other means such as shouts will render the challenge invalid. The difficulty of the game can be changed at my leisure, but is to go no lower than Adept. As I didn't want the game to be too easy, up next is only using shouts for the purpose of progression in the story. Following rule number 3 is removing the usage of any glitches or exploits. For the last rule, I was permitting myself to use Lydia in my playthrough. Starting off, I woke up from an amazing dream about beating a dragon to death with a fishing rod. This dream wasn't tied to anything in particular, or related to a certain video that was uploaded. It was just a completely random occurrence. I stepped off the cart and chose a high elf as my character, as the buff in destruction and magicka would be absolutely essential for this run to be completed. I would later realize that a dark elf would have been a better choice for a boost in destruction, but that didn't really matter, as my head and my neck were about to go through a rather messy divorce. Through a twist of fate, I was saved from inevitable death and began my journey. I ran past Alduin, paying no attention to the fact that it was literally raining fire, which I'm pretty sure was not the way clouds are meant to work, but also keep in mind that I went to a public school. I chose to side with Ralof, and was genuinely surprised that no racist remarks came out of his mouth. Considering I was a high elf, I let him take care of the Imperials while I ransacked the next room, looted the key off the freshly fallen corpse, and started to make my way through Helgen Keep. I remembered to pick up my cabbages, exhausted the town's supply of food, ripped the tails off a few dead skeevers, and ventured into the well-known. As is the ritual with my runs, I turned my attention to the Guardian Stones, all the while picking up every alchemy ingredient on the way. I chose the Mage Stone for increased magic experience, which turned out to be kind of useless in the long run, but I don't really do any research before I make these videos, I kind of just do them. Following this, I stopped by Riverwood to take everything off Gerudo, and sold off the loot of dead Imperial soldiers for a small price. I left the town and wandered around Skyrim, grabbing all the potion ingredients that I could. I somehow found myself running from an angry frost troll in Labyrinthian, and eventually found myself in Morthal, where I took all the death bells that were a core ingredient for an expensive potion. I walked around the map for about 6 hours, robbing random shacks, doing some light fish napping, and entered a shipwreck full of filthy mud crabs that were not friendly at all. It was proving to be quite the issue not being able to attack a single thing, but soon enough I managed to get enough gold to kick things into gear. I headed for Windhelm and rented a ship to Solstheim. When I arrived, I was ambushed by a bunch of ash monsters, which apparently was the norm for tourists around here, and dragged them over to a nearby enemy camp where they cleaned them all up. Realizing I wasn't going to be able to shake them off my tail, I waited a few hours and made my way to Kolbjorn Barrow. Arriving at the barrow to speak to Raylus, he explained to me that he was doing some grave robbing, but needed the coin to pay some of the local miners to walk into certain death. Luckily I came prepared, handed over all my gold, and was told to wait for a note. It was here that I actually decided to look into the quest to see if there was any combat involved, and as it turned out, I needed to kill a bunch of Draugr to progress in the quest. At this point, I thought the run was done for, but all clouds have a silver lining, and thanks to a video uploaded by fellow challenge runner Nurbit where he beat Skyrim as Big the Cat, I knew there was another item out there that could help us complete our run. With this knowledge, I left Solstheim behind me and continued my adventure over to the Riften docks to begin the fishing questline. I spoke to Viria, who told me to rip a juvenile mud crabs from its parents' claws, and also spoke to Swims in Deepwater, who gave me the task of catching fish all around Skyrim. I don't know why he couldn't do this himself, considering Argonians can literally breathe underwater, but I felt racism was better left to the Stormcloaks. Heading over to Bleakwind Basin, I ignored my initiation into the Nordic space program, made my way to the baby mud crab, and noticed that a very unlucky person had met a poor fate to the mud crab's family. Not wanting to meet the same end, I kidnapped the child, and I left the area for my next bounty. Up next, Viria told me to catch a glassfish for an alchemist over in Morthal, so I found myself a fishing rod and went to work. I caught the fish, turned it over to the alchemist, and was told of a local guard who developed quite the drug habit, and the alchemist needed a specific fish to craft the potion that would scare the guard. Always one for a good prank, I handed the guard the invisibility potion, watched him freak out as he realized he definitely didn't drink skooma, and another guard told me to stay safe as his friend literally lost sight of himself.
Staying safe, I hope.
Somebody do something!
Leaving the barracks, it was time to speak to the fish lady again. Letting her know of a job well done, I was given the objective of catching a goldfish for a child in Whiterun, so I made like an Autobot and rolled out. Spending the better part of an hour traveling around Skyrim, I managed to find a goldfish and handed it over to the little girl who immediately subjected it to unsanitary conditions. But I wasn't a marine biologist and I didn't want anything thinking I was. Viria told me about a fishing contest, so I decided to compete. I couldn't attack anything, but I sure could fish. And I met Brutus in Morthal. He told me of a nearby fishing hole where the competition is held, so I got my rod and I met him there. Instead of being a good fisherman, Brutus thought it was in his best interest to perform some light surgery on me. I took him and his friends over to the nearby Imperial outpost, where they met a traitor's death, and I looted his body for the next step of the quest. This is where things got very complicated. No matter how many times I read the journal or tried to fish up the ring from the stream, the next step of the quest simply wouldn't appear. I spent close to 8 hours loading saves, fishing from the river, reading the journal over and over again, and even went fishing all over Morthal just in case I had the wrong fishing spot. In typical Skyrim fashion, my quest had been bugged and I couldn't progress any further, and my penis had shrunk, taking me down to 2 inches. Or so I thought. At the start of the run, I named my character Todd Howard, and as a result, I was god of this world and everything in it. Utilizing the power of console commands, I let the game know that I did in fact read the journal. I know this would normally mean an automatic failure, but this was my last option, and I'm not allowing it to invalidate the run. Thanks to the power of religion, I cast my fishing rod into the stream full of troll skulls and lanterns that I had dumped over the last 8 hours, and I finally fished up Brutus's warlock ring, allowing me to move on to better things. Back in Riften, Viria told me about a bunch of mud crabs that were causing some trouble by Dawnstar. I arrived in Dawnstar and set my plan in action of getting the local guards to do my job for me. But it was immediately made apparent to me that these weren't your ordinary crabs, and I watched them tear a frost troll apart almost straight away. Not letting this discourage me even though the guards were running away and letting the entire town get killed, I took the crabs to a giant camp to finish them off and left before anyone could call Peter. Taking on my last bounty, I was filled in about an angry hawker just north of Windhelm. I got my Arctic grayling, planted the bait for the creature, and faced the next biggest issue since my depression. Since this entire run so far was just me bringing the enemies to nearby camps, I decided to stick with the trend, only for the Windhelm guards to completely ignore the threat against their city, and had another mammoth fall victim to my problems. After a while, bringing the hawker over to the giants camp put an end to it, and I got my first ring to set everything into action. The vampiric ring gave me the ability to cast a drain life spell without the need of becoming a vampire, but only while I was wearing the ring. Using rings for offensive abilities wasn't a failure unlike my birth, so the run was still valid. I went back to Whiterun, made some more poisons to sell off, cooked a ridiculous amount of potato soup, and found myself back at Colbjorn Barrow. Once inside, clearing out the Draugr was an absolute nightmare. I exhausted every magicka potion I had, solved the puzzles while I was treated like Piper Perry, grabbed some boots that gave me the ability of Jesus, and secured Artidar's Ring of Arcana. The Ring of Arcana gave me access to the spells Ignite and Freeze. Once again, I only had access to these spells while I was wearing the ring, and since I was only able to wear one ring, I took off the vampiric ring, setting my sights on Bleak Falls Barrow to finally get the show on the road. Making my way through the barrow was a breeze, and the bandits truly didn't know what hit them. I watched as bandits burned to a crisp, cooked myself some tasty spider's legs, sadistically retrieved my golden claw, and made my way to the end of the crypt, where the Draugr White Lord was put to sleep pretty much as soon as he woke up. I was screamed at by a voice for touching a beacon, so I took the Dragonstone, went to Whiterun, and handed it over to Fanta Pants on Fire. The Jarl told me that one of my whores was speaking out of line, so I went into the field outside and waited for him to land. Sometime after, I was able to slap him out with my pimp ring, and made sure to tell him that he was the one who made me money, not the other way around. I absorbed its soul and was summoned by the men who had the greyest of beards. Recruiting Lydia, I walked over to Ivarstead, made my way up the 69 steps, gave a frost troll some nice warmth, and met the Bay Grids, who told me all about moving around at the speed of sound like a hedgehog. They told me to retrieve the saxophone of Jessica Winkler, and I moved to Ustengrav to recommence baking my enemies. In the dungeon, I took joy in watching my victims burst into flames as they struggled to comprehend my power. I helped a few restless Draugr get some well-needed sleep, learned to shout for some reason, solved the puzzle for the millionth time, and picked up the note in place of the whistle I was looking for. In Riverwood, the cultists were waiting for me, and I informed them that they were worshipping the wrong god. I went inside to rent a room from everyone's favourite donkey, who took me into a sex dungeon against my will, and once again was asking for my dragon slaying support, so I took on the task and went to the dragon burial site. Reaching the burial site, Alduin appeared and summoned a dragon named Sugondees. Since my spell did damage over time, it wasn't long until sug on D's nuts, sucked on mine, and I took another soul from my collection. Donkey was amazed by my pimping skills and told me that I needed to break into the Thalmor embassy, so I went off to Solitude. Since I'd spent a large portion of the challenge gathering materials, I wasted no time in giving Malborn my things, which included enough cheese to make Shia Gorath go mad. I spoke to Donkey, who told me I needed to put on the stupidest party clothes I'd ever seen, and I hopped into the cart to go off and barbecue some elves. Arriving at the embassy, I was approached by one of my old hookers, who didn't seem to remember me. I assumed it was because I beat the shit out of her the last time we saw each other, and I caused a big enough issue to leave the room full of alcoholics behind me. I grabbed my ring, became Jackie Chan like in that one 90s cartoon show, and got my ass eaten like freshly mowed grass. Clearing the first room after some tactical thinking, I went outside, turned Dumbledore into a goblet of fire, and told the other elves that I don't take back talk. Back inside, I was attacked by the bartender for no reason, took the CIA documents I was looking for, helped out the Thalmor hostage, and had another bunch of Thalmor get the jump on me. I turned them into piles of ashes, took my key to the outside world, and was even successfully able to save both Malborn and his new friend from impending death. Leaving the embassy behind me, I turned my sights on Riverwood to go and meet Donkey again. I handed over the documents, and she honked that I needed to go searching for someone under the name of Esbern. So with that, it was off to Riften. After dealing with the typical shakedown from the guards, I walked over to Brynjolf, who needed my help in framing a fellow elf. I simply chose to ignore this and just went over to speak to the trader about buying some stuff, and when I returned to Brynjolf, he told me that Esbern was hiding in the ratways below the city. I entered the ratways and taught everyone who was in my way a very important lesson. I came across a ghost, was insulted by a plastic surgeon about the look of my face, and killed another wizard who hadn't heard that I was a force to be ignored. Finding Esbern, he refused to believe I was a friend until I told him that his donkey was still alive, but after some convincing, he agreed that he did miss his drug mule. Leaving his home, we removed the rest of the elves from existence and we left the ratways. I had reunited a man with his donkey and was told about Alduin's Wall, which was located just outside of Markarth. We went to the Karth Spire where I set everything aflame with Esbern's hot lady friend, solved a puzzle that even a newborn child could figure out, and was forced to partake in some blood play that would surely give a few players an erection. I noticed Esbern couldn't find the light switch, and he told me to go and speak to the Dark Whitebeards again about defeating Alduin. Back in High Hrothgar, I learned the Clear Skies shout, encountered some ice wraiths who didn't realize that fire beats ice, and screamed at Mario for telling me that the princess was in another castle. Instead, he told me about the Elder Scroll, and I left for Winterhold to continue my mission. Entering the town, however, Lord Farquaad refused to grant me access to the college because I didn't have the right spell, which apparently made me stupid. Not planning to waste any more time, I jumped down the side of the cliff, cooked myself some hawker, and put my Jesus boots to good use as I ran across the ocean towards Septimus's hideout. Septimus was all too happy to hand over the information regarding the scroll, and also gave me a magic Rubik's Cube. As a thank you, I tried to warm him up since I thought it would be cold living inside an igloo, but he didn't appreciate my gesture, and I just left his home to travel to Alftand. Fighting through Alftand was a lot easier this time, since my destruction had leveled up quite a bit since gaining the ring, and I didn't expect things to go as well as they did. I got sliced up by a bunch of Bakugan, forgot that gas was flammable, and stole a bunch of alchemy ingredients from the farmer. They were blind, they didn't know how to make potions. The Dwarven Centurion was dispatched with ease without anyone else's help, and I realized that Lydia was nowhere to be seen. I just assumed she died somewhere behind me, and kept on with my quest. I ran through Jellyfish Fields and was pretty shocked when I didn't see SpongeBob anywhere. I entered the next room and struggled with the buttons for the next 20 minutes, grabbed the magic book full of dragon killing secrets, and departed Alftand, hoping I'd never have to return here again, which we all knew was a lie. Back on the deep throat of the world, I opened the scroll and watched a man take a fully fledged dragonfire to the face without a flinch. I learned Dragonrend, was pulled back into reality, and had Alduin arrive to attack me. He obviously didn't read the script since I was impossible to kill thanks to the power of plot armor, and after a long fight, he flew off to Sovngarde while still smoking from my sick burns. I spoke to Mario, who told me that I needed to travel to the afterlife where Alduin was. Here, he told me there was a dragon who could help me with unaliving myself, without unaliving myself, so I went off to Whiterun to speak to the Jarl. In Dragon's Reach, Jarl Balgruuf told me he wouldn't help me with the civil war happening across Skyrim, and I went back to High Hrothgar to offer a child to the Mountain Men in exchange for them hosting a peace council. They agreed to the trade, and soon enough, I had the largest penises in Skyrim, all in a single room. After we all sat around measuring our sizes, Ulfric and Tullius agreed that a hot dog was in fact a taco, and the Jarl told me he'd help me catch Odahviing. I went back to Dragon's Reach and summoned a dragon for a booty call because I wanted to ride him. As it turned out, he was just as kinky as I was. I chained him up and dirtied some whispered things into his ear, and after promising I would swallow, he accepted my invitation to ride him all the way to Skoldarfen. Before heading off to the final stretch, I decided that my armor was too strong and was making the game a little too easy, so I went out to buy some new things. I went to Windhelm and sold off some more potions to make sure I had the money, bought some new robes in Solitude, and got a circlet from Belethor that raised my magicka. Now all prepared, I rode Odahviing to Skaldarfen. Touching down in Skaldarfen, I was very confident in my abilities at this point in the run, and I decided to see if my confidence was backed up. I immediately put not one, but 2 dragons down, and left no Draugr standing, launching fireball after fireball into their dead, ugly eyes. Inside the temple, I did a simple math equation and burned some spiders alive, because nothing has 8 legs and is friendly. I opened a secret door, learned the Stormcall shout, which was useless, and exited the temple to take on the Dragon Priest. Normally, I just run past the priest, but I always wanted to defeat it without running away. Eventually, I looted the staff off its corpse and jumped into the portal, entering the Land of Clouds. I was approached by a dead Stormcloak soldier who told me to be careful, but I knew exactly what I was here for, and that was to chew ass and pimp slap dragons. And after looking around, it looked like there was no more ass to chew. Like always, Sun made me prove my worth, which went extremely different this time around, as I just set him alight and made him run around like a headless Nord. Giving me access to the Hall of Valor, I went inside and spoke to the 3 musketeers who had been awaiting my arrival. I watched as Faldir pulled out his sword, Gormlaith raise her shield, and Hakon hold his axe. As for me, I shined my jewelry like the true pimp I was, and we all rushed to the final fight. I shouted into the sky and let Alduin know that he still owed me money. Soon enough, he showed himself. I spammed Hadoken after Hadoken into the dragon, racking up more and more damage over time, and after using the final fireball with the last of my magicka, Alduin accepted his defeat. I had rescued Nirn from certain destruction once again, and I danced around the flames of his defeat. I had proven that you can in fact beat Skyrim with nothing but using abilities from jewelry.